You can come down. It is a pretty handy tool.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not sure. Okay. Sorry, we're back. We're back.
We're
Do you
good?
mind starting over?
I'll start over.
Okay.
Happy to.
Apologies.
Good afternoon. Today is the June 27th, 2023 meeting of the City of Rollingwood Comprehensive Residential Code Review Committee, and I will officially call the meeting to order. And we will first start with a roll call.
Duke Garwood here.
Dave Bench here.
Jeff Marks.
Ryan Clinton, and we have two online.
Alex Robinette.
Tom Farrell.
The first item on the agenda is the public comments. We do not have any persons in person wishing to speak. Desiree, do we have any persons online wishing to speak?
I don't see any, and no one signed up.
Okay. We don't see anybody. If there's somebody who is online, that make sure you raise your hand online so we can see you. We can't see that there's anybody else here. So we will keep going. On the consent agenda, we have a discussion and possible action on the minutes from the June 13th, 2023 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion that we approve the amendments from the June 13th CRCRC meeting.
Do we have a second for approving the minutes?
Second it.
Is there any discussion on approval of the minutes?
No, they're good.
They were great.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The vote is unanimous. So we'll go to the regular agenda next. Dave has requested that we move first to the discussion of the draft of the CRC survey. So unless there's any objection, we'll go there first. Is there any objection to heading to the survey, which is item number 6? Nope. All right. Does one of the group want to discuss the survey?
Alex, are you going to take it?
I can do that.
Okay.
I think that I was thinking that before we did this, there might be some more background presented. But I think that if we look at it, we've got some comments that have come in from the strike force, and there were unsolicited comments about addressing this. A pretty high percentage. We have emails that have actually been updated since the survey ended up in the agenda packet. We have about 50% of people now saying they want us to do something, and another 26% saying that they'd like us to kind of have a limited scope, but still something, or move carefully or move slowly, be comprehensive. There is 16% that said to do nothing, but even among some of those, there are comments like, I don't want you to do anything, but maybe you need to address, height along the front setback or something like that. And then the remaining 8% didn't really give a clear answer. It might have related to something else like speeding or drainage or something that wasn't quite as clear what they wanted us to do. And so now I think through that, we've kind of learned how to ask some of the questions better. We've also submitted it to people that were kind of in the camp of do nothing in order to get some kind of feedback and make sure that the questions didn't seem biased. And so, we've done a lot of passes at this. We still don't think it's perfect. We're really looking forward to feedback from the rest of the committee. And I hope you all have had a chance to read through the questions and provide comments. But I think we're kind of right off the bat, there's a presumption that, most people are happy with some of the development that's going on in Rollingwood. And I think that the presumption is also that Rollingwood is not anti-development, and that it's not just a few kind of grumpy old people that are complaining.
Thank you.
And so kind of the first question is, sorry, I've got everything up on my laptop, so it's hard to find anything. Are you generally happy with the trend of new construction in Rollingwood? And our sense is that most people would say, yes, they're generally happy, but it's an opportunity for people to give nuance and answer the question more specifically. And then the second question, it's kind of the question on everybody's mind. Should we be doing this? And I know we've asked that question, and I think we have a pretty clear response on that, but it's, it needs to go in the survey, and we need to ask that question. And then what we did was to sort of introduce the main topics. We would cite the code specifically if it was there. We might cite some of the comments that led to us needing to ask this question. And so, it's pretty straightforward. We try to provide some graphics to clarify because it's very difficult to grasp. It's difficult for the three of us to grasp sometimes. There's a lot of permutations. None of us have any answers to this at all. None of us have really come down on this is what makes the most sense. And so we're kind of looking forward to sharing what we've learned with people to see, if we give them all this, maybe they can start to grasp it and see how complicated it is and what makes sense. And so, you can go through all the questions. I think one of the big ones is, should we change our height? Should we change the way we measure height? And I think it's going to be hard for people to understand what the implications are if you change it. And I think that kind of makes some people nervous, like, whoa, it could get worse, like, how do we know if it's going to get better or worse? Maybe you should do nothing. Floor area ratio, we tried to illustrate what that means. There's just a lot of tools here. We try to describe what the setbacks are, what the setback requirements are, and I think that there's a secondary piece. There's sort of two parts to setbacks. One is that there are actual physical setbacks, and then there are impacts along those setbacks, like what the building looks like along those edges. And people have expressed concern because that starts to impact privacy, or they lose trees, the house is looming over them and looking into their house. So we're trying to ask some questions about that. Sometimes the foundation height gets raised considerably more than what was there before. Sometimes that's for practical reasons. Sometimes, it's not clear. That's just something that's come up that people have asked about. People have brought up the issue of number of stories. There are a number of 3- and 4-story homes, but a lot of them are built within the maximum allowable height. So I think that when you have a 3rd or 4th story with a band of windows and trees are gone, that people have said have impacted them over their property line. And so There's a bunch of questions there. Should there be a limit to the number of stories, or should it be maybe a percentage? And I think one of the things I forgot to mention that I know Dave will mention is that there was the study in 2004 where a lot of these questions came up, and I can let you talk about that, Dave, if you want, and I'll just kind of throw that out there. We had started to put some of that in, but because none of it passed, there had been some pushback that maybe we shouldn't put that in there. But I think there's more kind of relevant context to why those things didn't pass. So I'll just focus on the survey. Light pollution, we changed it from dark sky because just in terms of kind of optics, I think some people felt like, we don't necessarily need to adopt this dark sky policy per se. It's just a nonprofit group that has some guidelines. It doesn't have any bearing. So it seems like the idea of light pollution might sort of be more meaningful to people, because I think that some people have expressed experiencing concerns with light pollution. Trees, we have 3 questions about trees because it features prominently, regularly in all the surveys and all the emails. There's just a high percentage of people talking about the trees. And so we've just thrown some questions in there about, we kind of just want to know, how big of a priority is it? Did we do enough with the tree ordinance? Should we consider a plan for rolling wood? Zoning by topography, fences, code enforcement. I mean, I probably don't need to go through all of this. And at the end are some questions that were presented about just building process and permitting that are optional, which seem kind of useful to some people, but not everybody. So that's what I got. What did I miss? Dave, Jeff?
You did a great job. Are there any questions? So maybe, just open it up. Are there any questions to what you've been talked about so far?
Yeah, I mean, we're up for discussion, so anybody who wants to chime in can discuss or ask or anything. I thought I heard an Was that you, Tom?
Yeah, I'm trying to get back. I somehow have folded up here. Here we go. One of the things that maybe I just didn't hear it because some part of mine cut out, but enforcement has been an overriding deal that I've heard of how we go about monitoring, especially on the weekends, has been an issue. I don't know if we want to put that type of thing in there because I think that's more of a managerial issue rather than a policy issue, because we've already established the rules and it's just how we go about enforcing them on that.
Are you saying that the code enforcement question is you don't find it appropriate?
I don't know how that it's quite frankly the we have the rules in place, and the enforcement is a management issue, not a policy issue that our residents would have something to say about. I don't think on that. I just know it's come up quite a bit, and I don't know if we want to acknowledge it in the survey or leave it out. No one is going to say, for God's sake, don't enforce the rules. I think that may be just a waste of paper the more I think about it. But
this question here is mine. I put it in, and my intention was twofold: to educate the viewer here that there actually is a place on the website where you can submit an issue, a code issue that you would like to have someone follow up on. I'm not sure that a lot of Rolling Wood residents know that exists. And also that there's, if that doesn't, scratch your itch, you can also call City Hall here and report a code issue. So wanted to kind of get that out there so that people knew that it actually existed. And then just to ask the question, is this adequate? Is this a good way to do this? And I can tell you this, the last time the first iteration of this question was much more volatile. And the group actually had me come back on it and soften it up a bit. But do you see anything wrong with it just from that approach, Tom?
We lost.
Tom, you're on mute.
Hey, I got it. I had to start kind of choking up here. No, I think that's kind of what I was thinking that we do. But I would ask, I think that we get enough questions on enforcement that we may want to include something in there. And maybe the educational approach, Dave, is the way to go.
Yeah.
And as long as we're addressing that, I'm okay with it. And if that's,
Yeah, Tom, I'm just confused.
I-
Are you responding to question 15 that's in the agenda packet?
I am responding to what Dave just brought up. And let me see which one it is. I'm not sure which one it is.
15.
Yeah, question 15.
No, I'm not sure that people know enough to be able to answer question 15 directly, David.
Uh-huh.
I think it has to be a fairly general deal. Again, I think that turns out to be something that is managerial rather than policy issue for the citizens to come in on, because we have the rules in place.
Yeah.
So I would, I really would probably not put that kind of question out there.
Okay.
We actually have a code enforcement officer. That's third party, but they are paid.
Let me ask you, are you looking at the original package that was put on in the packet I guess it was Wednesday, or are you looking at the more current one? Because we pulled
maybe.
the old one out.
I've only gotten one
Okay.
that I've seen, but I haven't had internet, so
Okay, all right, okay. Then you are looking
I
at
may
the
be
current
looking.
one. It sounds like, Desiree, the way that
you-
she's saying it.
Only one was published, but we did circulate
Yeah.
that email
Okay.
originally when you asked for it to be sent out.
All right, okay, all
So-
right.
Are there any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Specific to
issues?
code enforcement?
Specific to the survey. We're on the survey, so anything.
Well, I have a procedural question. Are we like voting on each question, going one by one? Like
We
what are we
don't-
now doing with Tom's feedback?
We do not have a vote on this on the agenda today. We have discussion regarding first draft.
Okay.
So today is a discussion.
And then what
session.
happens next?
Well, today is what's on the agenda is a discussion, not a vote. So we can't take an action today, but I can tell you what, I have plenty of thoughts about it, but I was throwing it out to the group if there's any other comments or suggestions or questions.
Yeah, because I have feedback, but I would go like question by question. Like we just jumped to 15, so I don't need to go. Do we want to take turns and each of us give our feedback on the whole thing, or do we want to
Sure.
go question by question?
We
How do
can.
we want to do that?
Doesn't
Go.
matter, however you want to
So
discuss.
maybe we'll let Tom. Do you have feedback on any other questions before?
no, I was just responding to the question of was there anything else that I thought
Yep.
should go in there. I wasn't directly directing my question to comment to 15. I would, Ryan, I think it would be beneficial, at least to me, to go through it question by question and kind of look at that as we go through it and kind of discuss it. If y'all, we could start with a general analysis, but I think question by question would be useful for me.
Sure.
I have a
Sorry.
quick question for the committee, and I'm wondering, so item 4 is where council kind of discussed
the additional requests to be added into the or, you know, kind of the scope of the CRCRC, which would also kind of, you know, by default end up in the survey. Would y'all want to pull that up and talk about what they, kind of what they directed at their last meeting and what they decided on that, and then maybe return? I think that might be helpful, just so you know what they said, you know, this is a yes, this is a no.
I think
Be
that's very helpful. Who was going to speak to that? Can you or
Desiree has all the information.
So let's pull up 4 and consider it
Okay.
along with 7.
Hello. So on June 21st, City Council held a meeting, and one of the agenda items was about the scope and timing of the CRCRC, as well as any additional questions they may have had for the survey and email distribution of information. So in regards to the scope, they talked about, there were very specific things asked, and they kind of gave a yes or no on each item. So in terms of sidewalks, they said no. Street lighting, no. Speed bumps, no. And speed limits, no. In terms of dark skies or lighting, they said yes, as long as it's referring to lighting on homes or houses on the lot. In terms of drainage, they said yes, only to the extent that it affects construction on the lot, such as with impervious cover. For the FAR, they said yes, for floor to area ratio. And for trees, they said yes. And they pretty much said in their motion, anything that citizens are concerned about that affect the redevelopment and construction of houses on a lot or within the lot, they would like you to continue looking at. As far as timing, they removed the previous timing guidance of having recommendations by October 1st. And they said to leave it to the discretion of the CRCRC to produce results as appropriate, balancing the interests of public input and efficiency and results. So they're giving you an extension of time basically and letting you decide what time you would like in order to balance all those. For the survey, they didn't have anything to add yet, but they will review the drafts that are published in the CRCRC agenda packets. And for email distribution, they opted or preferred to just review the correspondence that are grouped in your agenda packets, then be copied on every single email that comes in, like you guys are. Did you guys have any questions on those?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions with regard to that item? Okay. So we'll go back to the survey. Let me tell you what my overall comments are, because they're not necessarily specific to a particular question. When we and I put together the survey for the comprehensive plan, one of the things I did is spend a lot of time trying my best to learn how to write a survey, separately from writing survey questions for the particular task. And I think one of the things that are critically important is that you don't lead to an answer in any way, shape, or form. You don't anchor a question with answers, because that is a way to lead to a particular answer. So, and I think it's not in this draft, but in the previous draft, there were things like what other cities did. I actually think that was helpful information, but it was also biased in the sense that it was anchoring towards a certain answer. And if you have a variety of answers, that's fine, but when it was sort of anchoring towards a specific answer, I think that was bias that was not intentional, but the bias in the question. And I was very concerned with the prior version. I didn't realize it had been changed until now, but I was very concerned with the prior version that there was not intentional bias in a number of the questions. The second thing is that you want answers that are functional, that actually provide you with actionable information. And I'm concerned with this version as I sift through it. Things like should we look at, that's not functional information, because that we already know what we should look at. The city council's told us what we should look at. A functional information would be if you wanted information about data points, is here are 3 or 4 different data points that we could consider, measurement points that we could consider. Would you support a change to the measurement point of X, Y, and Z? And then within that, you could have yes, no, maybe, or I don't know. And I think that a lot of the questions, should we consider, I don't think that's helpful at all. Because again, we already know what we should consider. The council has told us what we should consider. The whole bunch of the questions are started with, should we consider? So I think what we need to do, what I would like to do with the permission of the group is come back with another draft that I would like to work on in the lens of trying to get, actionable, functional information. You also don't want your reader to have to do a lot of work, because the more work you make the reader do in reading or links or passages, the more the people are just going to stop, and you're not going to get the answers you want. So like on dark skies, I think we probably need to do a little bit of more work before we get to that question. I think the real questions that would be functional related to dark skies would be, for example, would you support an ordinance that said all lights have to be turned off at midnight? That's I just came from Estes Park. They request that all lights be turned off at 11 o'clock, I think it is. So what specifically is it? Do you support dark skies? Generally, we'll probably get a lot of yeses. Yeah, I'd like the dark sky. Okay, well, but that doesn't help us that much unless we get to the specifics of what it is. Would you support a limit on the lumens of light at night in a home? I think that could be a functional question. There might be 80% no, and we'll know to scrap it. But there might be yes. There might be a whole bunch of yeses, and we'll know to consider it. I think very much more specific information, in my opinion, needs to be in the questions in order for us to get functional information that we can take action on as far as the answers to the survey. So that's my overall feedback, is that I'd like to take some time with it, but it's up to the group. I guess I can do it regardless and put it in, because it's only a discussion item today. I'm happy to walk through all of them if everybody wants to do that too. But
I would like to comment,
Sure.
since we're still at general. And I hear everything you're saying, Ryan, but I think that we understood that we're still at the point where we're supposed to ask people, do you want us to look at this? You keep saying council has asked us to look at this, but we hear from a lot of people that residents are saying, what should we look at? And they don't feel like they've been asked yet. And so that's what this is trying to do. And we were very deliberately not being specific, because we don't feel like we're there yet. We feel like if people want us to look at dark sky, then we'll propose lumens or curfews or things like that. But if we did that right now, I think that we might really lose the room, because it seems, people are afraid we're being too specific, and we're trying to say we're not being specific. We're trying to figure out, what do people have an appetite for? So that's where we were coming from.
yeah, I think, that we would almost have to have a second survey if the first survey
Yeah.
was a series of, do you want us to consider questions?
And I think the ship has sailed on that, right? We brought that up in many meetings, like in the beginning, and Tom was very clear, we could only do one survey. And we tried discussing these items before the survey went out, and there was pushback on, why are we talking about these? We haven't even sent the survey out.
Mm-hmm.
So now how are we supposed, and I'm not comfortable putting specifics in the survey because we haven't even discussed them, and a lot of this item impacts that item. I don't think a survey is an appropriate way to put that level of specificity down on paper, because I think we need to have some way of talking about these things first before we actually put pen to paper on it. So it's like we're kind of caught in this loop here where we're not sure what to do, and I think that the openness of the questions is appropriate given kind of what we've boxed ourselves into based on decisions we made in prior meetings.
So, I think that I've been hoping that we could have discussions about each of these things, and that, I agree. I don't agree that we should have a question, that the purpose of the survey is to find out what we should be talking about. I mean, we've gotten direction from council. We've gotten lots and lots of emails from the people on what they want us to talk about. I think now's the time to ask them what it is that they support. And if we're not ready to ask them because we haven't discussed it enough, then we need to discuss it. I mean, I agree, we haven't discussed lumens, we haven't discussed any of those things. I agree we should discuss those things. And we should, I thought it was too early to work on the survey. I think this is proving that it was too early to work on the survey. But it's not helpful to the committee to not have last time we said, do you want 2 stories or below? Do you want 3 stories? Do you want 4 stories? It was actionable information. We could take that information, we could go to council and we could say, the people, 80%, 90%, whatever it is, wants a 2-story limit on the north side of Bee Caves Road. I don't think this gives us actionable information. I don't think this actually moves the ball to ask, should we consider? Because we're going to get a whole bunch of people saying, yes, we should consider it, and we're going to get some people saying, no, we shouldn't consider it, and I don't know that that helps us at all. It doesn't provide me with information that brings me to a vote, closer to a vote on what this community wants.
I think that one of the reasons why we put comments below every one of our questions was for the survey taker the opportunity to elucidate on what it is they think. If you say, well, if you get too specific at this point, then it becomes binary, yes or no.
So I would like you to look at the survey from the CRCRC, or the last strike force, because what we did is we had a series of...
I've memorized
Okay,
it.
good. We had a series of very open-ended questions at the beginning of each category that we looked at. So when we looked at one category, we started with very open-ended. What do you feel about X?
That's right.
And then we get into more narrow and narrow and narrow. And those open-ended are how you fill out, how you make sure you don't miss stuff. And then the narrow is how you get functionable, actionable.
I think that's exactly what we did here. That's exactly what we did here. We opened up with are you open to doing anything? And if you're not, you might as well put it away. And now let's get into building height.
Can we talk about what we did last time with the open-ended responses?
Sure.
What was the plan and how were those results analyzed last time?
Well, I mean, the results were analyzed by people reading them. So, I mean,
So it's been cited, the summary of it was that although many residents are concerned about older and smaller homes being replaced by larger new ones, there is no widespread desire to alter current rules related to home sizes. Who wrote those words and how was that summary derived from the survey results?
I probably wrote those words, although I can't promise you because I ended up writing, I think, majority of it. But it was from reading the survey results. And we did not have questions that were specific to specific action items because we weren't
So you
tasked
drew
with
a
that at the
conclusion without asking a specific question, and that's the issue I have with that summary, is that it's not based on any actual data because you didn't actually ask the question that you're summarizing. And if we go read it, it's pretty clear that there's a very high percentage of people that are asking for changes. And so there's a discrepancy. And so one of the things we wanted to do with this survey is actually find out, do you want to do that, before we summarize that people either do or don't.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I certainly could be wrong. I wasn't the only one on the commission. I think it was a unanimous vote of what the text of the strike force report was. So I'll take the blame if I got it incorrect, but it was a unanimous vote of the strike force.
I'd like to call attention because I've pretty much bored the other team members on with this ad nauseum. I went through the results of the comprehensive plan survey for the 3rd time this past week, and it takes a while to get through it, as you know. And every time I read it, depending on what frame of mind I'm in or what it is that I'm trying to focus on, I get a different result. It feels a little different from the last time I read it. But we have documented and in fact, we had brought it forward in the poster session here, that in question 3, where people say what they don't like about Rollingwood, a lot of people said it's about the new building and the size of the houses that are going on these lots. And then we see that same theme throughout the entire survey. You know, that people were responding to other questions, but kind of mentioning large houses in that response. I'll bet you, and I didn't count them up, I know for question 3 how many there are. There were actually 58 responses to that question that mentioned large houses. But throughout the rest of the survey, I'll bet there's another 150 or 200. But the way that it got interpreted in the end was, this isn't much of an issue. I'm going to say it was the number 1 issue throughout the entire survey. Number 2 being trees.
And I would say,
yeah.
the survey was not our only venue for citizen input.
Yeah.
We had, I don't know, 30 meetings, something like that, and lots of emails. I assume you didn't go back through the emails, but or watch the video sessions. But I will fully take responsibility if my summary that the strike force voted on was inaccurate. I do agree that it was not the targeted intent of that commission. This one is. So I think that's why the council has asked us to take a look at that now. I did not intend in those words to foreclose this. In fact, I've always advocated that the city have one of these commissions.
But I think our perspective is this, that we don't want pitchforks and shovels coming after us after a while without getting the overall community sense that yes, change is needed. There's a lot of folks that think change isn't needed, and we respect that. That's fine. But what do the majority of the people think? Is change needed, and if so, can we proceed? Can we go on to the next thing?
I'll support Ryan in that I would like to get a response from the surveys that are specific and give actual actionable, responses that we can make recommendations on. If you sit down and try to do it, I think it's very hard to do that because a lot of these questions impact other questions. And I don't think that the survey is the right forum for that. I think that you need to have a conversation with folks who have really dug into the details in terms of how to interpret all of that information and come up with actual recommendations. So I do support, if we were given permission to do phase 2 of this and we actually had a bunch of proposals with lots of specifics, I would support phase 2 of the survey if Tom would allow that. But at this stage, I find it very hard to put any pen to paper on numbers of too much specificity without having more information and more public conversation around the topics.
Jeff?
Yes, Tom.
Oh, sorry. 2 things. One, I think that when we talked about large houses, and again, the strike force's primary objective was not the residential part of this. So keep it, I think that's important to remember. But when we talked about large houses, it was more of a design issue than it was just the size of the house, that comments we got back. And, Park Hills is a perfect example. We have several houses on Park Hills that are very large houses, but we have one that everybody goes by, or a lot of people go by and say, gee, I don't like that house. So it was a design issue, and I think that y'all know the reason. It was kind of pushed up closer to the street, and it looks imposing. But that's part of what we were talking about. Jeff, if we have to have, the reason I wanted to do just one survey is my experience is it's very difficult to get people's attention, and it gets more difficult the more times I asked them to fill out something. So I was hoping to get one shot at getting all their information at one time. If that doesn't appear to be a workable solution, then I'll make it happen so we can do 2 if we have to. But I would rather, if we can make this work on 1, I think you get better participation on it.
Yeah, I think that's really the conversation we should be having now is like, what is the project plan? Are we going to do 2 surveys, like a first initial survey, discuss the results, come up with some solutions, then present those back to the community? Or do we want to just, if we only have one shot at it, then do we do the survey at the end and have all the conversations up front? I've heard pushback from community members on why are you guys talking about these solutions without doing the survey first? I've heard that from a number of community members that have questioned what we're doing in these meetings without getting information from the public first. And they're questioning, well, I know you have emails, but that isn't the full population. Can you really get any conclusions from emails if everyone hasn't had a chance to fill it out? So I thought that this survey, the way it's constructed, the framework of it was a good shot at doing a survey early on in the process. But I'm also open-minded if we want to scrap that and just do a detailed survey at the end. I'm open to that. I'm also open to having 2 rounds of surveys. So I think I would really encourage the group of us to discuss the framework that we're trying to operate first, and then pick that path and then stick to it from here is what I recommend.
I'd like to make a comment that I think that, you know, I feel pretty comfortable with kind of the scope of this survey in terms of doing all the things that Jeff just mentioned. I think it's imperative that we are still trying to ask the public. We've sent out notices, we've had meetings, we've asked for emails, but there's still a sense from residents that we haven't really asked them, what should we do? And I feel like we need to get that out the door. And this survey, I feel like, has just enough detail to give us direction that we can then go off and respond to the things that people are asking us to, at which point we can make recommendations to P&Z. People can come in and comment during that time. It will be public. It will then go to council. People can come in and comment. I don't necessarily think we need a secondary survey that asks people what wattage we should put in their bulbs. I don't think people are going to know or care. I think that you get too specific and, you know, people aren't going to respond. So that's my feeling about it.
Okay, so I've said nothing, and, you know, I'm gonna come from the perspective of my trade, and Alex, I think, will appreciate this, but in our world, you know, doing the survey is all about related to the programming that we do for projects, trying to figure out what are the needs, what are the wants, what are the desires. And, you know, I so appreciate what Jeff said about looking at the procedure, because I think that's critical. And, you know, if it's 2 surveys, so be it. The bottom line is we need to do every effort, and it's tedious and it's more work for us. I'm good with that. But we need to do everything in our power to make it feel like we've been as inclusive as possible. Okay? And I mean, it may be overkill in some ways, and what I'm hearing from Ryan and his, and I'd love for you to take a next step with editing this if you feel like you could improve that. But hey, we could add a little bit more specificity to it, you know, to sort of cater to a little bit more detail. But I agree with Dave and Alex. I think it's a great first effort. Okay, so I didn't give you anything too specific other than, hey, I think we, again, if it's 2 surveys, I would be good with that. Or if it's, you know, more public input and 1 survey, we just need to make an effort to have that sense of, well, we made every effort to create inclusiveness. And once we have that behind us, we can march forward with all the detail in the world.
If
Yes, Tom.
we put some more specifics in this survey,
Yeah.
and we get a good response, I'm assuming that it's going to be, people are going to say, yes, I want to make some changes, because I think that's where our appetite is for the city. And then I think we're going to end up with being able at that time to determine if we have to have another survey or not.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
I agree with that. I think we could figure it out down the road.
I would hope not, just for the simple, I know people don't like to do surveys, and they get, most people in Rollingwood just don't. I haven't had, I thought we had what, Ryan, 250 responses on our survey.
Yeah, but I think that sounds about right. It was really good according to the survey folks.
And I thought it was terrible, given that we have, 1,200 people in the city, but I guess 540 houses. But that still that just didn't seem like a good number to me. But I'll take it for what it's worth. The people that know what they're doing with that. So, and so I would, if we could modify this a little bit to make it as specific as we can, and then come back at our next meeting, go through each question, vote on them, get those done, send it out, and then after we get that back, if it turns out that any of us, and I'll just say any of us, that feels like we need to do a second survey to get more data or more answers, then I think we can probably will deal with it at that time. But I would, if there's a possibility of making this one survey, I think we're better off doing it. That's just my feeling.
So,
But Jeff, I'm not going to tell you can't do two if you feel like we have to have it to get the answers that we need.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Jeff, you asked like what is our plan, and Tom is our leader, so Tom may have other ideas. I can tell you what my plan has been. My concept has been from the beginning, which I think annoys at least half the people on the commission. But my view was that we have a lot of meetings where some of us come as experts develop an expertise in a particular area, come and present on that topic. So if someone became an expert in dark skies, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the options that we should be considering? Come to the table with some possibilities of things that we should consider. Make sure those things are in the backup of the agenda, giving the public the opportunity to comment on the specifics of each of those things that we have become experts in. And then by the time we get through the charge of each of the topics, becoming kind of experts in each of the topics, not experts in having an opinion on what the solution is, but experts on what the options are for solutions if we adopt any solution. Should we decide that there's a problem that needs to be fixed by a solution, then we can propose eventually towards maybe 2/3 of the way down or halfway to 2/3 of the way down, have a survey that gives options for people. And again, maybe some things are too specific, but I do think gives them some options of the things they like. And which is one of the reasons why I, for example, came up with the height framework and put it on the agenda and had it as backup, because I want people to be able to see what we're talking about, propose it at a meeting, discuss it, and then should the committee think that it's worth considering, put it on the survey as a potential possibility for curing whatever problems we think that there may be. So that was my concept. Again, Tom's in charge. I'm not in charge. But you asked what our vision of the action plan was. That has been my view, because that's what we did last time, and I think it worked.
How do you propose coming up with the options?
Well, again, I think what I just said, which is that we become experts in subjects, and the expert in the various subject that we're talking about comes and explains. Here are the various options. Here are the various potential problems that people may, as a community, we're dealing with. drainage, whatever, lighting, size, scale, volume, roof characteristics, setbacks, all of those things. And then here are the possible options. And the committee itself probably is going to say, no, I don't like some of those options, and we wouldn't want to bring them forward. But we could then, in the survey, present the options that we as a group think the community might or might not want.
The only issue I have with that is all of the questions are related to each other, so it becomes hard to do them discreetly. Like each of them individually, come up with your options for this one particular topic when they're all interrelated.
I mean, I think some are, right? I mean, but they're not all.
Not all.
I mean,
Dark sky is not related, right?
Right.
That's the one exception.
But building height, setbacks, those kinds of things really are related because they have to do with the way a house sits on a lot.
I mean, I think they're related, but I don't think we can't ask the community, do you think that, I think we have to ask the community, even if it's related to other things. I think we have to ask the community, do you think that the rear setbacks should be bigger than 20 or smaller than 20, I guess? I
We
think that's
do
a-
ask that question,
We do,
and we
yeah.
do the same with height.
So
And so I don't think we should number, but
As I read the question here, it says, are Rollingwood's current setbacks too large, too small, just right, not sure, comments. So it doesn't say, as I read this question, maybe I'm missing it, do you think that the rear setback should be greater than 20 feet?
You know, it's
Well,
it's a more complicated question than that because of the unusual nature of Rollingwood first, because of the hilly nature of it, and also some of the shapes of the lots that we're dealing with. Whenever you throw a number out, you know, someone goes out and they look at their backyard and say, well, hell, I can't do that. Why would I expect someone else to do that? Because my lot's pie-shaped. But if you throw something out there that just kind of expresses a direction, more, less, higher, lower, whatever, at least you can get the public's appetite for what's doable, what should be the next step, what should we be looking at. Then we can get into the specifics of what those things are, because I think all of this stuff is somewhat nuanced. We really are in a tough spot. If this was all just flat plain, if we were doing this in Iowa, it'd be very easy. We're not in Iowa. We're here in Rollingwood, Texas, and it's complex.
And when we started talking about percentages for floor area ratio, there was a lot of pushback on that. Just throwing numbers out, caused a great deal of complaint, and rightly so, because we hadn't spent a great deal of time analyzing what exactly should it be, what makes the most sense. And so when you start putting numbers on this survey, people start deciding that that's what you're going to do, or they don't really know. Like, they don't know what the difference between 40% and 30% and 60%. And so, but they might know, yeah, maybe this should be looked at, or no, it's just fine. And I kind of think that that's what this group is for, is to be the intermediary between what people are saying, yeah, you need to do something about this or not, and then start vetting those things. But I think there's going to be an uproar if we start getting too specific, but I would really like for you to tell us what questions should be more specific and what we should ask, because that would be very helpful.
I just want to make one more point before we get into that, and that is, when we talk to people about setbacks, there's about a 50% chance that they don't know what a setback is. Although they won't tell you they don't know what a setback is, all they know is there's not enough of it. Whatever it is, it's not. And we're using this survey to at least help educate people, so that when you are using the word setback, they say, that's what it is. Members of our subgroup were discovering that the side setback for a corner lot is the same as the front setback is for that same lot. Most people in Rollingwood, they don't know that. And it's a big deal. you're talking about, what is the buildable area? So if we get into specifics about changes right now, people are hardly even ready to digest what it is we have today. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't disagree with you and I think that's the flaw. That is the flaw in the question. Because if you say, should we be talking about setbacks, all of those people that you just named that don't know what a setback is will say yes. And that will not be functional, actionable intelligence. So I think you have made my point.
I sat down and tried to think about how to write a question on FAR, and I have the data, the spreadsheet, 500 homes, and I can like slice and dice the data, and I'm so in the weeds of it. I can't ask that question to anyone who hasn't done the same analysis, right? Like to ask the question, I would need to give everyone the data, have them analyze it, and then get back to me 2 hours later.
And obviously they're not going to do that. So, look, I mean, we may have just a functional disagreement about what our role is and what the community's ability to engage meaningfully is. I personally trust the democratic process. I personally trust people to meaningfully engage, and I think that if we set up the question in here's what a setback is, and here are the current setbacks. So you tell them up front,
Yep.
and then you say, do you want a greater or figure out a way to ask, do you want a greater or smaller rear setback, front setback, side setbacks? I do think that there is a way to ask the FAR question that both educates them and asks for a response, and I trust we have an incredibly smart group of people in this community that can meaningfully engage. But I'm just going to stop there because I know I'm climbing up a waterfall.
But we did exactly that, Ryan. If you look at the setback question, we give you graphics describing what they are. We then spell it out, and then we say, are they too large, too small, just right, not sure? And then you can add comments. So if we ask people, is the front setback too large, is the side, is the like, we can't ask a bunch of questions. So it gives people an opportunity to describe it. And as you said, they're plenty intelligent. They can specify what it is they like or don't like. So I don't know if you've read the survey, but I think you should go through it and see, what questions we asked and how we asked them, and see if there's areas that, you think we should improve.
Just respectfully, I read the version that was sent around, and I have skimmed the new version that is in the backup, and I have identified the questions with specific comments. So you don't need to tell me you need to read it, or that's exactly what I said, because I've already pointed out where I think a meaningful functional survey could be different.
Some of the issue we have is that we've got a subgroup that is, and we've been working hard on this. This has taken up a huge amount of time just to get to this. As we had one draft that went out, and then the following day after that, it was just all this discussion and texting and stuff like that. Maybe we need to do this, or change this. This doesn't feel right, and we came up with an entire different version of it all. And really, that was the way we've been working for the past 2 weeks. It's just been this crush to try to get this thing done. But it's only 3 of us. And you guys who are not in the subcommittee are seeing it for the first time, or just considering it for the first time. If you have specific things that you want to do to these questions, I think I'd be welcome to look at it and see what it is. But, being able to get everyone we're not allowed to get everyone together to try to work through this at the same time. We can't do it in 2 hours. But we can at least, take some feedback and get it back to us, and we can look at it and say, this subgroup, our subgroup, can say, well, yeah, maybe so, or maybe not. I don't know. I know I've had to swallow my pride a little bit. So, but we were hoping to come out of this evening with, yes, you're on the right track. Let's go forward. all the questions aren't completed yet. There are several issues that have not been addressed yet, and they need to be added in. I would like to be able to, add those questions to what we have here, and then consider whatever it is changes you make. I'm good with what Tom said as far as the code enforcement. Yeah, that's right. That doesn't have to do with a lot. We'll get rid of it. Just take it out. It's no problem. But if some of these questions need to be nuanced or changed in a way that you feel is more digestible and more useful, let's see it. But the questions are the questions. Don't start from scratch.
Respectfully, you can't tell me what I can and cannot propose.
Yeah,
I mean,
I sure can.
well, look, you're not a majority of the commission.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you don't speak for the commission.
Okay.
The commission speaks for the commission. The vote of the commission speaks for the commission. There have been a number of snide comments about how I think suggesting that the rest of us aren't working as hard, and you should know that the rest of us are working incredibly hard too. We're just not doing the same things that you're doing. And I would have worked incredibly hard on the subcommittee on these questions, but I was excluded from
Why were you not on it?
because the last time at meeting you guys voted to exclude me, so
No,
that's fine.
No. I encouraged you to join it in the meeting, and then I sent a separate email encouraging you to join it, and I would step off.
Well, again, the commission is where the decisions get made, and at the commission, I was voted off of it, or I was excluded from it, which is fine. It's totally okay. But I just don't want you guys to think that we're not working just because you're working.
Sorry.
Well, I think getting back to this, from a standpoint of where we are, I think it's a good start to where we have to go on that. I do think that I would like to see some more specific questions be added to this, and I'll work on doing that over the next week to try to get that out so you have time to look at it. And then I think, Jeff, you had asked me for a write-up on conformity, which I have not
Correct.
completed yet, but I've been working on it. Non-conformance. So, and it's going to be difficult for me to communicate very much with anybody for the next 2 weeks anyway, but I'll try to get that out to you.
Can we go back to the prior conversation? Because just to be clear, in the last meeting when we discussed the subcommittee, I was trying to encourage Ryan to join the survey committee because I was afraid that this conversation may happen. Maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been during the meeting, so I sent a separate email encouraging Ryan to join the survey subcommittee, and I would step off. I didn't see a response to that. I sent the email through Desiree and the city staff. I don't know if the email got delivered to Ryan, if he saw it, read it, I have no idea, because we're not supposed to be talking other than in these public meetings. So I just want to be clear on the record, Ryan, I'm encouraging you. I think it would be a lot better for our process if you were on the survey subcommittee. I encourage you to join it. I will step off. I think that would be very productive for us to make progress between the meetings, to enhance the feedback loop, and not to drag this on so that we'd have to have all the conversations in the public meetings, and it's going to drag on from meeting to meeting to meeting. So can we make a decision on that? I'm formally inviting you and not excluding you, Ryan. So I want you on the survey subcommittee, and I will step off.
I mean, I think I'll be happy to do it. I think we have a fundamental disagreement about this, and which is not going to be cured by me being on the subcommittee. So, I mean, I have felt this before, and I feel it again, that I'm kind of in the way here, and so I probably will just step off the commission after tonight's meeting because I don't think I'm being helpful. I think that the feedback is when you guys are ready to go, these are the questions. Respectfully, if that's the view, these are the questions, and don't mess with the questions. I'm not going to do it, but thank you.
Ryan, I totally disagree. I think your viewpoint being maybe as you well, I don't know how we're gonna describe it, being different or from a different perspective, I think that's totally healthy, and I think that's what we need. Please. Don't feel,
Yeah, Ryan, I will
second that.
tell you, I think that's
We'll-
terribly important for me personally.
We'll
that,
talk about it later. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Get that
but-
we. So,
But I
I'm
do want to
enjoying it.
address that because I do feel like you add a lot of value and I appreciate your feedback. I think it is important for us to have this conversation, and I think it's very valuable. I just think that I think you being on the survey subcommittee would enhance that, right? So that we're not having something drafted. So much time and energy and work went into this before this meeting, and now we're being, Alex and Dave are being told, no, I want to start over from scratch. I just think it would be the process would be enhanced a lot more if you were working collaboratively throughout, between the meetings.
I agree.
I think I agree with that as well.
So you can't backtrack.
And I echo everybody else's comments. I think you absolutely bring an important perspective to the commission as well, and certainly your background, which I don't have. And so I think it's always good to get your input from an angle that we're not thinking about. Now, we may not agree on all of these things, but that's why we're here. If we all agreed, I don't think the people in Rollingwood would appreciate that. So.
It is very difficult to get this stuff together without being able to share it outside to the other members of the committee before we get here. It'd be just so good if we could get some comments along the way. But here we are, we bring it out, and it sits here naked, and this is just a hard process.
It is a hard process, and part of the reason that I think we have different perspectives is because I've done a lot of these, and I've been on a lot of boards, and I've gone through this process many times, and there's a level of comfort for me in having it come to the commission, having feedback, going back, working on it again, coming back. I mean, I think it came to the commission 3 times last time. And then it went to the city council, who had their own comments, and then it came back to the commission, and then it got sent out. So there was a long process of feedback, and I'm completely used to that process and have a comfort level that I
think we're still
understand is
doing
not
that
the
though.
same.
This is just the first time. It's coming back at least one more time and probably a third time. So we're probably following all of those.
And
steps.
I think that would be great.
Yeah. No, I
Inclusive.
certainly want Ryan to have space to make feedback and provide his comments.
Sure.
I'm encouraging of that. I will. Dave and Alex and I talked while I was helping on the survey. Ryan's first point was around not anchoring the answer and introducing at least a perception of a bias. And I did make comments on a few of the questions that I felt have information in the introductory section, which I don't think adds enough value of enhancing the responses relative to the risk of perception of bias. So in the overview section, I don't think the second paragraph, I think it could be considered unnecessary information because that's all supporting why we're asking the question. We're asking the question. Like, I don't think we need to rub it in why we're asking the question. Like, we all know that information. If anyone questions why we're asking the question or why we're asking the survey, we all know that, but I don't think we need to put that into the overview itself. But that's just my view. I'm happy with it being there. First off, I think the survey is fantastic. I think you guys did a great job. That's just my own little very small comments that I have remaining are the overview. That second paragraph, I don't think we necessarily have to have it. And then in the dark skies section, echoing what Ryan's comments were earlier about anchoring, we talk about 5th grade students in the light pollution section. We talk about 5th grade students at Eaton's Elementary gave a presentation providing education awareness of night skies. To me, that's, we don't provide both sides of this argument. We don't talk about how Sally really enjoys dancing around at night at 12 p.m. under her lit up tree lights, right? Like, we only talk about one side, how the fifth graders are providing education around light pollution. So, you know, I would recommend if we're going to do something like that, we either provide both sides or we don't provide the information at all. If we really feel strongly about educating the public, you know, one of the ideas that I had was you could have a supporting document that kind of argues both sides of the questions. If people, because there isn't like a media covering us, right? Like, if people want information about these things, they might not really have anywhere to go. So if we wanted to provide supporting information, I'm supportive of us sponsoring, you know, both sides of the questions for public to learn more about the topic. But I don't support putting it in the question itself. I think the survey itself should be sacred space. I think people from all perspectives should feel comfortable answering these questions. There was one of our residents talked about trees and how trees are not museums and we shouldn't, you know, trees aren't sacred or whatever that resident wrote in his email. I think that resident should feel comfortable answering the survey and shouldn't feel like there's any perception of bias in any of the questions. So I think we just do really need to be careful about that. And I think for the most part, we've done that throughout the survey, except for the two sections that I pointed out.
Yeah, and I see both sides of that, Jeff. I know that those sections went in and went out and went back in. There's a bit of whiplash, and I would be happy wherever that landed. It's so.
Yeah.
Is there any more discussion on the first draft of the survey?
Well, how about next steps? Where do we go? I'd hate to get off of this subject without knowing where, you know, what's going to happen next. And I don't really think it's something that needs a motion or anything like that, but we do need to at least know what to look forward to for the next meeting.
Well,
Okay. Thanks.
given that we've forced Ryan onto the committee, Ryan, you good with that?
I have a lot of thinking to do when I get home tonight.
Well, I hope it's short and you're involved
It won't
in
be. You don't know me well if you think
Okay, well,
my
but-
thinking could be possibly
But I mean,
quick.
look, I'm gonna be forward thinking and say, I just feel like with Ryan's presence, that there's another opportunity to really go through the survey and see with his input about maybe some specifics and his suggestions, see if you guys feel like you can make that necessary improvement. So we feel more confident about what we have. Again, I still think it's a great start. I mean, you know, I feel like Ryan's gonna bring some good perspective.
Mhm.
There's gonna be a little bit of push and pull, and we're gonna have a better product with y'all's attempt to scrub it again.
I agree with that.
Well, and Duke, would you be interested in replacing me as the architect on the survey committee? I mean, it doesn't matter to me. It's
No, I don't need to do that.
I mean, we don't have to have, the input does not have to be limited to the people in the committee. So anybody can come back at the next meeting and with suggestions and put them in backup and everybody can see them beforehand. And
Alec, I personally, you know, again, the fact that you are in the role of counsel and you bring some better overview, I think that's beneficial. I'm not trying to backtrack and back out, but hey, I don't need to be on this committee.
Is there anything I can say that will get you to say yes?
not right now, no.
No.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tom, do you want to add anything? Do you have anything else on number 4? Tom, you're on mute if you're talking.
I'm sorry, kind of choked up. No, I think I'm good right there now. Excuse me.
All right, is there any other discussion on number 4?
So how do we make that happen? Get you involved and let's scrub it again.
Well, I don't have an answer to that right now.
Okay.
We have a member of the public who wishes to speak. Sure, can you come around and introduce yourself, please?
My name is Mary Elizabeth Kofer. I live at 3306 Gentry Drive. Brian, I'm not sure when you moved to this neighborhood, but from the first time I heard of your involvement in Rollingwood politics, not even politics, just the city itself, I saw that you were invaluable to our neighborhood, and so please don't get off this committee. I think that there are so many valuable people here. I see Duke here, and I'm just so grateful for all of your hard work. But I think that you spoke for me so many times, and I've never even talked to you and told you that. I've sent you a few emails, but you
And I
speak for
appreciate
me
them deeply. Thank
very
you.
often. So there's that. Thank you,
Thank
all of you.
It's really kind. Okay, so I guess we will move to item number 3. Dave, is that your item? Discussion and possible action on emails and letters?
No, I didn't put it there.
Okay. Did anybody put that item on?
It's just a standing item that's been requested, so just, I think in the last meeting, Tom, just like, you guys had a vote to just accept it.
That makes perfect sense. So I guess we will just accept into the record. Is there a motion to accept into the record the correspondence from the community?
I'll just add to that item. I think those emails have been put into the agenda packets. I think Alex took the lead this time around to go through and add it to the email summary, and then Alex sent that, and now it's in the document center. So we have a summary, like a running tabulation of those emails. So I encourage everyone on CRCRC to look at the document center and look at the updated draft of that Alex sent in.
I don't know that we need a motion to put things in the record that are already in the record. So if there's, I don't think we do. I think if they're in the backup, they're in the record. So is there any more discussion on that?
No.
Okay, then we can move to item number 5. In the spirit of what I had mentioned earlier, which was the way that I kind of envisioned this process was somewhat similar to the strike forces process. And that was we would each kind of dive into various topics that the group would discuss, come up with an understanding of what at least some portion of the community wants, come up with some ability to respond to that, and then test it. See if people think it's a dumb idea, a good idea, a bad idea. And so we've talked about a number of times about the possibility of simply a hard 35 feet above wherever the ground is at any given time. And what I wanted to do with this proposed hybrid framework was come up with the tent theory that several citizens have mentioned or asked for or encouraged us to do. And the idea is this. When you have a flat lot, it's pretty easy to see where the maximum height would be, which is 35 feet. And height, by the way, I think we talk about it wrong. The height really is the height limitations in Rollingwood are a 2-dimensional plane above the ground, wherever the data point is. Wherever you choose to measure from, you go above that, 35 feet above that place, and then you have a 2-dimensional flat plane across the top. It acts as a top. And there can be a development beneath that top. It is a flat top. And so on a flat lot, that is easy to comprehend, which is a flat 2-dimensional plane 35 feet above the ground in a flat lot. Of course, most of our lots are not flat, And so, or many of our lots are not flat. Mine is an extreme example, I think, of an unflat lot. And what the current building ordinance does is say, it does create that same flat 35-foot two-dimensional plane on top of your lot. It just you have to pick somewhere where that 35-foot plane starts. And so it picks if you have a lot that has a variation of above more than 10 feet, it gives you 10 foot from the bottom. And if you have less than 10 feet, it gives you 10 feet from the top, essentially. And so, but either way, it's a two-dimensional plane above the lot. And I think here's where I think we talk about it wrong, because we say you get 45 feet if you have a sloped lot. It's not exactly true. You always get 35 feet above the datum point. It's just that your lot may slope down in some places beneath the datum point. At that point, you can get, it can appear to be higher. It is actually not any higher. It is not an inch higher than 35 feet above the datum point. It just appears to be higher because your lot has sloped down in some places. Again, the two-dimensional plane stays exactly the same in a sloped lot or a flat lot. What I feel like, and again, this is me not being, not looking at AI, and so maybe I'm misreading the tea leaves, but this is me doing my best to read the feedback from the community. And it feels like, to me, again, I could be wrong, and that's what to me, this is what the survey for, is to figure out whether I'm wrong. But to me, what I hear, with my own personal biases admitted, is that people have a problem with these huge facades, whether it be on the side of a house or in front of a house or back of a house, that because of that sloped lot beneath the datum point, again, top stays the same, but the bottom can fall out because of the sloped lot, that it creates this opportunity for what is greater than 45 in height, even though it does not exceed that 30-foot, 5-foot horizontal plane, two-dimensional plane. And so what we get is these examples of, and we rarely talk about specific houses for politeness reasons, but when the citizens talk to us, they point out specific houses. And those specific houses, when I go to look at them in person, share the characteristic of one of those walls seems insanely high because of the slope dropping out beneath the 35-foot plane. And when that wall is on the front of a lot that slopes down towards the road, it really seems dramatic because it can slope down, and you could have under the current code, a 45-foot wall in the front of the house. And that does begin to feel like an apartment building when you're looking at it rather than a house. And then also we heard from community members that would say, look, I bought this house, now when I turn to the side, I see a 45-foot wall right on my setback. And again, I mean, I understand why a community member would not want a 45-foot wall right next to their house. Again, it's not any higher than the 35-foot two-dimensional horizontal plane, but it feels like it because it is taller than 35 feet beneath the plane. And so what I've heard at least some communities members suggest is the idea of something like Austin's, which creates it cuts the edges off the top on the sides. So it kind of creates a tent over the development. And I remember, again, I'm not an architect, so it's out of my league, but I do think I remember both of you guys speaking at one of the early meetings when you were looking at examples and saying, look, the reason this house doesn't look dramatic, even though it's still 9,000 square feet or however big it was, is because that second level is pushed a little bit away from the front of the house. And when that second level is pushed a little bit away from the front of the house, it protects this kind of imposingness. I'm making up words now, but that's what lawyers do. It protects us from this imposition of that giant wall. So I attempted the best I could to at least throw out spaghetti on a wall and say, what could that look like? Because we haven't talked about that in a meeting. Again, putting it in the backup, letting the public see it. I don't know if anybody did, but it's been there. And this was what the idea that I came up with, which was effectively to create that data point, that place that you measure the 35 feet from either the front door of the house, effectively, the median or the average. I'm not entirely sure which one it should be, of the front facade line of the house, the front of the building of a house, or the back door, because some of these houses will slope back and down in the back, and some will slope up in the back. Create that 35-foot plane, which is it's a little bit like, it's pretty close to what we have now, except we cut off the edges, the corners on the second. We cut off the edges on the second floor, so that you can no longer build a 45-foot wall on a sloping lot that slopes down to the side. You can build a 35-foot wall, and then if you want more height above that, you have to push it back from your neighbors. You have to push it back on the sides, back towards the front and the back towards the back and the front. It might be a horrible idea. I am not wedded to it in any way, shape, or form. The whole point is to have a discussion about it. Tom and Duke and I have been working on this, and I don't want to speak for them. I think they both were open to the concept. The numbers that I put in here are irrelevant. It was not intended. They're just simply placeholders to kind of begin the thought process around it. Actually, no number in this am I wedded to in any way, shape, or form. 30, 35, 20, 50, none of these numbers matter. The idea is simply, do we want to think about a concept of a tent to push back the development on the sides of the houses to prevent a 45-foot wall next to your neighbors in the front or in the back? So with that, I'll open it to discussion if anybody wants to discuss it.
Alex, are you first, or can I? Okay. So, when I saw this, I said, "What? This is pretty good." Glad to see you come up with something like this. I only have one real comment, and that is, in the with regard to how tenting is done in Austin, it is done more than just with horizontal or vertical dimensions. There's also angular components to it, where someone says, well, from a certain distance away, something can't be more than 15 degrees out this way and all that. If we were going to take this approach, I would like to explore that a bit, okay? Because I don't think you're off. This is in a good direction. So, but I would want more. Oh,
You mean that too?
just like this. Just like, yeah. So
Well, could one of you add?
but the tough thing about it is this is really hard to do.
Yeah.
You
Well,
give us- yeah.
I was trying to make it simple so
Yeah.
that everybody could, we could all understand it. B,
Right.
Our staff and code enforcement could enforce it. I deliberately did not look at Austin's because I wanted to solve, what I wanted to do was solve the problem that I understood, again, maybe incorrectly,
That's a good
was
picture.
the consensus of the community. And if that's the biggest problem, and that's what I hear as the biggest problem, at least when you say, give me a house that you're mad about, those are the ones that I continue to see. So that's what I was trying to solve. But I would love for you to talk more about those things.
Can we pause and connect the dots between this conversation and our prior conversation around the survey and specificity and the timing of the survey? Because I would personally support a tent question. I don't see anything specific around tent in the building height section, and I think that maybe having the survey earlier on to get that community input could be helpful for this conversation. I think it's a good example where we could add specificity, but also supporting the survey in its current state, current philosophy around the survey, and asking general questions earlier on in the process.
Any other questions or comments? I would love for you guys to talk about the angle thing, because that's not something I'm familiar with. If you want to talk about it or tell us about it, that would be helpful. If you,
There's a good reason not to read the Austin.
no, I mean, I deliberately don't
It's
care
tough.
for
It's
the
pretty
most
tough
part. I mean,
stuff.
I want to know like what's
Yeah.
out there, because I don't want to reinvent the
Yeah.
wheel, but I deliberately don't care if somebody else has solved a problem that our community doesn't have. I want to solve the problem that our communities have.
I'll chime in. I was also happy to see this. I thought it was a great effort at sort of trying to find kind of the middle ground between what we have and what people are asking for without going too far. I think that you also have sort of zeroed in on something that I see as the biggest source of impacts, which is what happens along the setbacks. Because I don't think, and we asked this question, if we address impacts on the setback, is that enough to not change the setback, not worry about the height, and not worry about the volume? And so then if we can start addressing, well, what are the issues along the setback, and looking at other places, I think we might come up with some good solutions, and people might feel better that, oh, okay, well, we're not changing the setback distance, and we're not changing the maximum height, and we're not, imposing an FAR. But this is just one hypothetical. But I do think that when I took your suggestions, and I had to kind of do it graphically just so that I could get my head around it. And I think one of the things it doesn't capture is that you can still build a 34-foot box along the setback. And I think personally that the 35 feet, when it's consuming a lot of the setback, is a problem. I don't think it's a problem if you have a pitched roof or some small percentage of 35 feet along a setback. But as we've seen, you can start to build some pretty big boxes along the setback, and they might be white stucco and they're highly reflective and, and a flat roof. And so I think it's a good direction to start focusing in on, what can we do along the setback to help some of these mitigate some of these impacts, including, keeping the trees and things like that. So I think it's a great start, and I do think that we should start looking at, how do we quantify like the terracing concept, or how far do you step back so that you don't end up with, a small section at 34 feet and then up to 35 feet because somebody wants to do that, which would be hideous, but.
Yeah, and I both admittedly do not have any design or software or skills. So one of the reasons I wanted to throw it out is because I would want that discussion, because I don't have the ability to draw this. I don't have the ability to do what you guys do. And I agree. I don't know that these numbers are right. They may be too big. They may be too small. They may be insufficient. It might be a terrible idea. So the more feedback. I mean, I guess I would ask you this: do you think that the second floor setback, as some have described this, should be that the height should be lower than 35? Is that kind of where you're headed as far as what a wall could be on the setback line?
Yes, I mean, I would think you could possibly look at an eave height restriction along the setback, so that, and for some percentage, so that you might have a 2-story building where the end comes to the setback and it might go to 35 feet, but that's not so imposing. But it's when you get the flat roof, the boxes, that yeah, I don't know. It's so complicated. We've not been able to come up with, language that captures all of that. But yeah, I think kind of, I don't know.
Well, to me, I will tell you that I think that that we are perfectly capable of coming up with good solutions, and that to me, I will just, again, this is why I want the survey to be specific, but to me, it feels like, my own biases admitted, the fact that I'm not AI admitted, it feels like this is a top concern of the people who come to our meetings when you say, what is it that you don't like? Tell us an example. Because when they just say, oh, well, the setbacks are not being enforced, that doesn't really help us, to be perfectly frank. Like, which house? Show us what it is, because we need to figure out what exactly it is, the issue. And it seems like the imposing nature of a giant wall, whether that number is 30 or 25 or 35 or 45, whatever it is, that is a issue that people are fired up about.
And
One more thing, sorry. And I also think that the FAR can begin to combine with something like this to get us to a solution. And maybe we don't have to say 35% of the second floor or 75% of the second floor, which begins to be really complicated mathematically for staff to enforce. If we combine something like this with a modest FAR, because I think you've told us that, you know, only a very small number of houses even exceed 50%, something like that. That if we have some kind of, I think the community might be up for a modest FAR with something like this that begins to deal with the problems that everybody, that I may mistakenly believe are consensus problems for our community, without dealing with it, without messing with anything else. Because what I feel like I hear is people aren't necessarily mad about the size of, like, people don't want to say you can't have a certain square footage on your lot. People don't want to say I get to decide how big your house is. But people do want to say, I don't think your house should negatively impose on the people next to you. And if this is the thing that most people feel like is negatively imposing on the people around them, then maybe we can fix that problem. Okay, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll thank you for putting this together, and I echo your sentiment. After reading through the emails a bunch of times, I came to the same conclusion that I think the height, when people are talking about height, they're most concerned about height at the setbacks. So I have the same point of view, that is the top height concern from residents, is height at the setback specifically.
Well,
That's not been, that wasn't addressed specifically, but I agree wholeheartedly with what your analysis is. And I think that's exactly right. The other point I'd like everybody to keep in mind, the height ordinance that we have was an absolute compromise situation, because we couldn't, the last time we looked at it, we went through the same gyrations that we're going through now, with the exception that we did not have a predominance of flat roofs. We had pitch roofs, which made the height not quite as imposing on that. But when we did this, because of the newer construction at the time this ordinance was done that went for higher ceiling heights, which is why that we went from 30 to 35 on this. And the other issue is always going to be our slope lots, how to be fair to the property owners that have slope lots. And you know, to be honest, there's not an ordinance we're going to write that's going to help everybody on that, but that's where our Board of Adjustment has to have good motions on, that they come in and take care of that. So, Ryan, I think, as I've told you, I think I've sent you my emails on that I thought this was great. I thought this was a lot of the problems that I think we see, and the questions that people have brought to me about height. And I thought you did a great job of encapsulating that sentiment on that. Thank you.
So we're really talking about the idea and the notion, the concept of a tent. And I think that's, to me, you know, we need to kind of be in agreement that that's something that we're comfortable with, and then we can try to attack the aspects of the details, how to make it simple, reasonable. I mean, again, the McMansion ordinance, which is what Austin uses to describe their tent, it's geometry-wise challenging. So clients look at it and go, "Oh my gosh, hire the architect." It's a great boost for our profession.
Well,
You
no
know.
offense, but I want people to be able to understand ours without hiring you, although
Yeah.
of course in this neighborhood, they're gonna hire you anyway.
No, I understand, right? And I, like I say, I think, hey, let's get on board with, we think that the tent concept is appropriate. That's a direction we want to try to go, and then we'll try to massage how we can come up with the details and the specifics to make it manageable. Yeah.
I would love if you or Alex have any comments now about how deep the restriction should go on the second floor, and whether this concept even works, given that we got lots. Some lots are are deeper than they are wide. Some lots are wider than they are deep. Do either of you guys have any thoughts on that? Because again, I can't do this
Yeah.
mathematically. The concept I can come up with, but the mathematics of it is out of my league.
Well, I think it's, Alec brought up the notion of possibly an eave constraint, and that might help sort of set that perimeter datum. And then we could, like I say, I don't have an answer to your question specifically, other than just kind of trying to geometrically visualize it and work through what I think is a reasonable envelope or tent. But it might include some eave constraints, okay?
Can you tell us what that means for the dummies in the room like myself?
The eave would be at the perimeter edge, that along the boundary. And it would maybe be something far less than 35 feet.
I had a question for Dave when I was in his house, which is, what is an eave? And he showed me an eave. So I don't know if that's what Ryan's asking, but Dave showed me. So Dave, maybe you want to demo.
You got to
explain to us
dumb
what
it
an eve
down
is?
even further
Yeah.
for the dummies in the room.
Well, it'd basically be where the wall hits the roof plane, okay? Whether that's flat or sloped, so that hinge point.
So is that another way of accomplishing what Asheville does, which is their height limit goes to a ceiling instead of a rooftop? Is that another way of kind of keeping someone from manipulating the rules by having a flat roof?
No.
Or is it not?
The ceiling height one scares me because I think it's just too complicated. And, you could have a ceiling height and then you could add some giant amount of roof. Like, I think the impact happens from the outside. And so I feel like it should be controlled from that dimension and not from the inside.
You're going to have vaulted ceilings.
I guess my question wasn't, do we want to have an Asheville-like concept? My question was, is that attempting to hit the same problem, which is that flat roofs can be so much higher than a tented roof? I'm using all the dummy words to describe this.
No, but it'd be-
Well, and also I think I was deliberately not wanting to use the word tenting just because there seemed to be a lot of negative reaction to that. And I can't remember, Dave or Jeff, do you all remember what the city of Austin was calling it? They didn't call it tenting.
Well, actually, they do call it tenting, or the
Well,
mansion
but
ordinance.
the heading was something different.
Oh, well, actually, Duke's got a thing here, subchapter F, of the residential design and compatibility standards.
Well, they're
called,
just-
like,
they're
setback something.
Setback planes.
Setback plane.
Back plane, yeah. I thought that was a better term than tenting because I don't think we want to draw a lot of association with Austin or even the term McMansion. So,
Listen,
I
I
think-
totally agree. I'm just using those words because it's easy for conversation.
oh, I
And
know,
we're
but
all
I'm
on the
just
same
saying going
page.
forward, we're talking about introducing tenting into the survey, which I agree with, but I think that calling it something different and also maybe writing it differently. And I need to spend more time really studying the Austin code. And that's another reason why we should just say, I guess that's what I was trying to do with addressing impacts along the setback. And did that resonate with people? And did they start to visualize like, oh yeah, maybe that's where these issues are really occurring. Yes, I would like you all to focus on some specifics to address that. And then we could go off and try and figure that out.
I agree with what you're saying, Alex, and I think that whenever we were going into the survey, our attempt was to at least have the discussion go around building height and setbacks and things like that to kind of get people comfortable with the notion of the geometry of things. And then, without saying tenting or anything like that or getting too complicated, but if we had had the go-ahead to play with those geometries, then the logical result might be to use this kind of approach to solving the issue. That might be it. And I don't think that the public really cares that much about how we do the calculations or what it is. I think they're more interested in whether or not we've got something that manages the size of things in a way that is respectful of neighbors. That's it.
And I think that we have to be very clear that we're not trying to manage square footage, because when you say size, most people are going to interpret that as you're going to tell me I can't build a big house. And so trying to clarify that that's not the case. Like, we don't care what the size is. In the town I'm in right now, it's already pretty restrictive, and now they're talking about the houses would have to be 2,000 square feet, and that includes the garage. So but it doesn't include what's underneath in the basement. So we're definitely not there, and that just wouldn't fly in Rollingwood. But we have to be careful because that's what people hear.
I
All right,
mean,
well,
really, the idea, and again, I'm going to use these words, the idea behind the McMansion ordinance is to legislate design. Okay? If you think that can be done, that's their attempt. And it's, you know what? I mean, to be honest with you, it's reasonable.
mhm.
I mean, the outcome.
Yeah, I visited with an architect that has done work in Rollingwood and Austin, and his take on it was that everybody was against it when it first came out, but he said it's making good architects even better, and it's making kind of average builder developers, they get to raise their grade point a little bit. It's not much, but it seems to be helping overall, was his opinion.
Sure. I would agree. Again, I'm not a McMansion expert, but we've done a dozen under that ordinance. And I mean, it's again, it creates a lot of gamesmanship on the part of builders, developers, and architects. But you learn how to work with it.
My goal here is that it starts the conversation, and if anybody has ideas of how it could be shaped better, what it's missing, if this is, again, if it's a bad idea for reasons that I haven't thought of, that those are the things that come back to the next meeting with some with more feedback. That's what, and again, I know to me, that's what this process is for. Like, we come with stuff, we talk about it, and then hopefully people have time between to think about, well, I didn't like this part of it, I did like this part of it. They come back and we can talk about it at the next meeting. I know that's frustrating.
No, but with all due respect, I feel like we were doing exactly what you've done, and there was a bit of a backlash for that, and statements were made. No, we're not making these decisions. We're just, we want to hear what the community wants. And so we kind of backed off from doing exactly what you're suggesting. And I guess I agree that we should be doing that, but I really do think that we're still back at the starting line of asking people that. So I don't know how much time we should spend digging into that, but if you all agree that we should right now, then let's agree to do that. And
I think sorry. I think we both come from an honest, because I personally, I think I told Tom I didn't want to come up with this at this stage because I thought it was too early. So it's just an honest kind of, vision difference on how this process. But the reason I did is because we were already floating some ideas like FAR and 35 feet from any point. So I felt like if we're going to have those conversations, then at least this should be part of those conversations.
If we're going to do that, can we settle on process? Can we set down a plan that we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and the end result is going to be this? And we'll know, and we just go through, and instead of, this feels too amorphous to me, what we're doing, all right?
I agree with that.
We all have our own ideas about what the end result is going to be or what it should be, or how fast we ought to get to it. But if we can't agree that it's, for instance, time to do a survey yet, then we are in a lot of trouble. We need to get that reconciled. We need to figure out, okay, well, if it's not time to do a survey, what's it time to do? And how are we going to know that it's time to do a survey? Like that. I just feel like it's been a little bit too loose.
I agree with that. I think out of respect for each other's time, I've seen folks put a lot of time into a lot of things, and I think we need structure to be efficient with our time.
How do we get to that?
I think we need to send out a survey.
Survey on the survey.
I go back and suggest that with Ryan's assistance, we try to scrub what we have to date, add some specifics that might make him feel better and be more, would hit at the concern to have some really valuable information that comes in the form of feedback. And again, I think Jeff mentioned it probably would have to go through that another time. I think that's probably what's going to happen. Again, I'm going to hit on whatever we need to do to create a sense of inclusion. That's what we have to do. And if we, to make Dave happy, if we say, okay, let's know we're going to scrub it 2 more times and then see if we're ready to go public, then that's a goal.
And at what stage,
Dave,
do we want to promote the survey at some point? And at what stage do we want to do it to really get the draft version out there into the public so that we can get public input? So I haven't seen any public input on this. Has anyone seen any public comments on the agenda packet? Okay.
No.
There are ways to do that, right? We can be proactive in seeking out that feedback if we want to. So I think we should be discussing how and when we do that.
All right. Well, I got to say, I said, let's not put it out on WhatsApp until at least after tonight. And I'm not sure it's ready to go.
Yeah, and maybe, to your point, maybe now is not time for showtime, right? So but we should do that before we go to council, right?
I don't know.
Jeff, I think
he's right.
I think that we have at least one more meeting before we do that.
Yep.
Before we even do that. And yes, and I will tell you, some of that may depend on any additional comments we get from our residents on that. Because we may get some of them that have a different thought, and we may have to change some of that. So.
All right, I'm a little lost. Where are we?
We're on number 5, discussion of potential height framework concept.
Yeah, we're still.
Can I just add one more point? Dave, I think you had sent me something on like a structure for this process that I thought looked pretty good.
That was
Like,
just for this evening.
Just for this evening.
Just
But
to get
continuing
through
that
our
train of
thing.
thought, I think we should maybe have that as an agenda item on the next
Right.
meeting in terms of like what is the process and actually,
I'm good with that.
I encourage you to submit that as an item for next meeting that we can review and discuss, because I thought it was really good.
Thanks.
I think that is exactly what we have the tools to do, which is put it on the next agenda, somebody come with a proposal, and then we
Okay.
put it in the backup materials, people can see it beforehand, and we can discuss it and vote on it.
Okay, this was for the sub-team, how we were going to approach discussing the survey as it is tonight. That's all it is. But it is a process, you know, so.
I think these existential questions are important. So I think, Tom, I assume you agree that maybe it makes sense to put that on the next agenda of
Absolutely.
planning what
I don't
how
have a
we
problem.
would like to see the next, however, 4 to 6 months.
I'll take a crack at it. And maybe more than one person ought to take an individual crack at it and submit them together, and we just kind of look at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what council does, right? I mean, you might have
I wanna
3
know.
proposals on the same issue, and they can talk about them together and then vote on something and move it forward.
I missed that meeting.
I've seen meetings where they have multiple proposals on the same subject.
Good.
All right.
It does happen.
It does definitely happen. Number 8, discussion and possible action on future meeting dates and agenda topics for discussion. Is there anything there that people want to talk about now?
I think we just hit one.
I think,
Nope.
oh,
The only thing I'd add is if we have a additional agenda item that comes in, we just need to make sure we get it into Desiree on a timely basis so she can get that out. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think I'm not going to say anything you guys haven't heard me already say, which is I still think the priority is just asking some basic questions of the residents, because that's what they're asking us to do, and we just keep meeting every 2 weeks or whatever and talking about the same things, and we still haven't clarified exactly what we're supposed to be talking about. Yes, I know we have a list of things that we agreed to, but we need to understand the level of importance. And so I'm just voicing my frustration that I don't feel like we made very much progress. Having spent a lot of time working on the survey and thinking about these questions a lot and talking to other people, and I kind of hoped that this meeting would be a little bit more productive about honing in on the survey that we need to send out. But I get it, government's slow.
It is. It's frustrating, and I know that.
I agree.
Any other comments on number 8?
No.
Anything that is on the agenda on any of these topics that somebody wants to talk about before we adjourn? All right, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
When are we meeting next?
I think it, Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's every 2 weeks on Tuesdays at 5. Is that right?
So, July 11th.
I'm not here.
All right.
And I think Desiree has sent around emails in the past asking if people can't make it. If we can't get a quorum, we can certainly move it.
I'm gonna be gone then, so.
Can you Zoom?
Probably not.
Okay.
I'll be gone in mid-July too, but I think I'm not yet gone at that point. If I am, I'll zoom in if I'm able.
Well,
I'm in Yosemite.
you know how, when we started this meeting, you said, we're not going to make any decisions, which, I was fine with. If, if we tried to put together a strategy, a go-forward strategy for this committee, individually, and get them submitted, and we can't meet, can we still get them shared out? So that at least you have opportunity to consider it for the next meeting, whenever it is.
Well, the meeting will still be posted, and we can attach agenda items and back up to the meetings, and that can still be circulated.
Is that true? Can we post things if we know we're not going to have a quorum?
Oh, well, there's no point if we know, but
There's also the document center, and we can share information.
Yeah.
The only thing that can't happen is collaboration or decisions about
All right.
information.
we can email city staff and
Yeah.
they'll circulate it to
We can
everyone.
circulate that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Just like we did with the
Come
first
on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm whining, you're right. Okay. Yeah,
All right.
Okay, I'm
I'll be in town for the next meeting, so I'll be there.
good.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's unanimous. We are
Lovely.
adjourned.
Lovely.